Namaskars and a very warm welcome to everyone. We will now commence our second session of the virtual conference. This is on social media as a tool for propaganda, radicalization, and recruitment. We have Mr. Stevie Weinberg who would be moderating this session. He's the Deputy Executive Director of ICT IDC Herzliya. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. And good morning to our friends in New York, good afternoon to our friends in the Middle East, and of course, good evening to all of you watching us from India. Welcome to the virtual conference on cyberspace, emerging threat, terrorism and the response, organized jointly by the India Foundation and the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism at the Interdisciplinary Center, IDC, Herzliya in Israel. So as mentioned, my name is Stevie Weinberg and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of ICT, and I'll have the distinguished pleasure to serve as your moderator for this session. I would like to thank the India Foundation, Captain Alok Bansal, Ms. Soumya Chaturvedi, and our respective embassies for making this dialogue a reality. And of course, I would like to thank all of you watching us now. Under the slogan, "It takes a network to beat a network," the dialogue will highlight the importance of cooperation in countering terrorists on the cyberspace. Terrorists use the internet in a wide range, in a variety of ways, which can be seen, if you want, on the spectrum, where terrorists can use the internet for propaganda, radicalization, recruitment, fundraising, communication, data mining, intelligence, or conducting cyber attacks. And this session will deal with the first three, namely social media as a tool for propaganda, radicalization, and recruitment. We're joined by a very distinguished panelist, Ms. Prabha Rao, Professor Gabrielle Weimann, and United Nations Assistant Secretary General Michele Koenigs. I will introduce each of them prior to the 15 minutes opening address. The plan is to have everyone speak to 15 minutes. I'll ask a few questions after that, and if time permits, we'll then open it for Q&A. Ms. Rao and Professor Weimann would actually present the key trends and threats in terrorist use of social media as a tool for propaganda, radicalization, and recruitment, and will then ask Assistant Secretary General Koenigs to see how the UN is seeing that threat and what are the key principles of the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate response. Question can be asked in the chat, and I'll turn to selected participants at the end of all speeches and ask you to unmute, open your camera, and ask a short question for a specific panelist. And for my Israeli friends in the audience, I will ask you to avoid making long speeches or long comments that do not end with a question mark. But before starting, I'd like to turn to my dear friend, Ambassador Danny Carmon. Thank him for his ongoing support and leadership in helping with the organization of this dialogue and for fostering friendship and stronger ties between India and Israel. Ambassador Carmon, of course, served as the Israeli ambassador in India and in Sri Lanka, and he served in many prestigious positions within the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Madam Koenigs, you may be interested to know that he served as the Deputy Israeli representative there as well. He is today, of course, a senior fellow at the ICT, and it's a great pleasure and honor to ask him to say a few words. Ambassador Carmon, please unmute and take it away.
Thank you very much, Stevie, and it's a real pleasure to participate in this conference. And frankly speaking, I'm so happy that this conference is happening with the leadership of ICT and India Foundation. Many years ago, in the mid-90s, Professor Boaz Ganor and myself participated in a joint trilateral committee by the US, the Palestinians, and Israel. And in this committee, in the same way that Professor Ganor said today that the definition of terrorism is something that the world cannot agree on, in the same way the three parties to this trilateral committee could not even agree what incitement means. Incitement is a very important element that has to be confronted. But we did understand, all the three parts understood in the same way that the world understands about terrorism, we understood about the incitement, how incitement can lead to terrorism. And in those days, social media was not so developed as it is now. And I think that the same debate that took place there between the three parties should take place worldwide. And I think that in the context of India-Israel relationship and growing partnership, while taking this subject into a very important subject, not only on the governmental level, but also on the non-governmental level. And as I said this morning, I really want to commend India Foundation and ICT for taking this issue at the level of a conference. And I thank you very much for doing so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency Carmon. I would like now to turn on Ms. Prabha, who is the Executive Director of the South Asian Institute for Strategic Affairs, and of course, a distinguished scholar at the India Foundation. She's a former Indian Police Services officer who served in several locations throughout the globe. She also runs an NGO, Encourage India, for providing skills for the victims of trafficking and left-wing terrorism, extremism. This is a very interesting and important subject. So Ms. Rao, the screen and the mic are yours. Please take it away.
Thank you all very much. Also thank India Foundation for giving me this opportunity. When I had prepared my talk in the, yesterday, a lot of it was covered by Jennifer. And so I hastily had to redo something and put up what perhaps she's covered most of it, but a few aspects that she had not touched upon. So I'd like to, when we talk about social media, Soumya, is the screen, can the screen be shared, please?
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Well, I'm just going to start with the first quotation, which has been attributed to Aulaki, whether he said it or not, but it's very pertinent. It says that the internet is like a fishing net catching surface fish, not bottom fish. We used to catch one at a time, we catch 100 or 200. I mean, this actually shows the scope of what the internet can do and how powerful it is as a tool for radicalization and recruitment. The second quotation, which I'd also like to put to you, has been made by a known Bangladeshi blogger who had been taking a very Islamist line and has changed his stance now. But if you could just read it, that way of getting our messages further afield. It's better than all the leaflet runs the BNP used to do, the Bangladesh National Party. Look how fast it is, how far it can get your stuff out, literally all over the world, and no trudging around council estates, putting leaflets through letterboxes, having dogs chase you, etc. You see, in a way, it just shows on how actual people have been using the internet, have been using the internet as a tool for radicalization. Now, as I said, Jennifer has done a lot. Next slide, please, Soumya. Yes. When we talked about routes to radicalization, yes, we are talking about the huge opportunities it is offering, which is something that has been discussed. But what we need to realize is that the internet is giving an opportunity to act as an echo chamber. People are using it very cleverly. They come out with a particular thought and get a number of similarly placed websites to start echoing the same thing. It kind of starts giving credence. Also, the person is made to feel that he or she is not and isolate, because many of the people who have got into radicalization, one of the key things which I have seen as a police officer is that many of them are a little isolated, are a little socially inept, and these are the people who come, and this gives them a sense of community. When people ask, who are the kind of people who are getting radicalized, there's no ballpark, there's no thumb rule, there's no ballpark prototype that one can use. The only prototype that we've seen is that people who feel that they have a grudge, people who are definitely socially inept and would like to have a greater sense of community and would like to have a greater sense of relevance and would like more relevance, and well, of course, there is the issue of the emotional outreach that many of the sites are able to bring out. What we have seen is that radicalization, of course, we can talk about Andrei Breivik, we can talk about white supremacists, we can talk about Buddhists, Buddhist nationalists in Myanmar. We can do all that. But if we talk about Islam, what we are seeing is that there is this whole thing, the meme that comes out. Islam is in danger. Would you all please step up and work? Now you're giving people who are somewhat isolated a cause, and you're doing it. It's not rich, it's not poor, it's not educated or otherwise. The one common thread I have seen in the number of people whom I have interacted with who have been either radicalized and have been incarcerated, or who are on the verge of being sent to such a position as would make them commit a crime. The thread that I have seen is that they are somewhat isolated. The other thread about Islamic radicalization I have seen is that there has been work on them in which suddenly you find a more gregarious, a more outgoing person becoming more more Islamized insofar as the usual one doesn't want to use such thing, but the usual thing of long beards, the usual thing of austerity and prayer and so on. We see these kind of steps coming out. And yes, the internet increases opportunities for self-radicalization, and this is the part that is very worrying. You see this, Soumya, if you could come up to the next site, the next thing, yes. If you could just see the roots of what the internet could do. Now, when we talk about radicalization, if you would all see this one, it's self-evident. If you would look at radicalization, what we are talking about, and this is, I think, we need to make a very clear distinction between radicalization and violent extremism. If we are talking about radicalization per se, I don't know how many are quietist radicals. The internet has actually, if we just talk about how many people have actually committed a crime, the percentage would be very small in actual terms. But if we are talking about the number of people who have been radicalized into accepting a more extreme ideology, that would be quite a large number, unfortunately. So, internet facilitated radicalization would be quite a bit. But if you look at this figure, internet facilitated radicalization which ends in violent extremism, that is a small subset. Now, how does it reach onto that? I think one of the best analysis of how this is reached has been done by this Egyptian academic, Dr. Mogaddam. Soumya, if you could get on to the next screen, please. Yeah, he spoke about the staircase to radicalization, which he didn't look at the internet, but we could talk about where online radicalization would come. The first is, of course, an interpretation of material conditions where people feel that they are the deprived lot, they are the wronged people. So this question of being wronged and is at the ground level. The second level is when they feel that they have options to fight against unfair treatment, and there they start discussing on forming groups. This is where there are recruiters who come in, who understand that there is a problem. Now, what Jennifer said is a lot of things are local. Yes, a lot of the internet messaging is local, but there is an underlying and subtext of how it is linked to a larger context, to a global context, and that is why it makes your little local problem actually very important. This is the message which is given at the first floor. This we have seen, in fact, over a period of time, over the kind of interceptions that we have heard. They start talking about how they perceive the fight to be unfair, and here you have internet groups who say, fight for Islam, Shariat and Shahadat, and these kind of statements which come up, which they form groups in that. Then the second one is when they start saying that fight for it, stand up for your rights. I mean, whether it is a Shaheen Bagh or whether it is something else, there is a lot of internet activity before such actions are taken. This has also been seen in Kashmir. So this has been seen in a lot of cases in South India, whether it is Tamil Nadu or Kerala or even Karnataka, where I'm speaking from. So, there is this displacement of aggression which goes on, which is actually fueled by a few people in these internet groups who, apart from radicalizing, which is done at, say, the first floor level, at the second floor level, they are actually mobilizing people to move. And this mobilizing is also done which acts as an impetus for further radicalization and which acts as an impetus for violent extremism in the next step. And the third is, of course, the third floor is moral engagement. If you look at the kind of verbal thread that goes through the radicalization, there is at the ground level, we are the oppressed people. People do not understand how superior our religion is, etc., etc. At the other, I mean, we are the oppressed people. At the third floor, it is actually they are very superior. I mean, we are oppressed, but there is this duality of having a superiority complex and a victim complex. So this duality of the victim and superiority complex is again a factor which one has seen throughout in all the cases that one has, that I have been looking at. Like in the morning, there was a talk on what would be the timeline before a person turns into a terrorist. One is very hard to say because, I mean, the reactions would be different for different people and whatnot. But but these steps are what are normally seen. And the third floor, so to speak, there is this thing of we are so superior, yet we are being victimized, and we have to fight on to that. So there you get onto the fourth floor, and the perceived legitimacy of terrorist organizations, the perceived legitimacy of terrorist acts are being brought out. When, for instance, in the case of the French teacher who was beheaded, the Pakistani, the perpetrator's father, who is in Pakistan, said that he endorses what his son has done. I mean, there is a lot in, for instance, I mean, of course, as an Indian, we are talking about Pakistan, that is, but it is a very evocative example. When you look at Sati's death and the father turns around and says, we endorse what he has said because, he made a few statements which were not in keeping with what we believe. Now, this is the kind of thing when you are agreeing to a perceived legitimacy of the terrorist organization and you say that is fine. And that kind of statement as it goes around and gains momentum on the internet is a very powerful radicalizer. And so, as I said, while we don't talk about violent extremism, we are talking about people who are getting radicalized through these statements. And that is, the number is a lot more than what we are talking about, the VE part of it. The R part of it, the numbers are much greater. Now, we reach the fifth floor where there are a few handpicked people who are willing to take a step which would be unacceptable under any societal norms. Unacceptable, I mean, when you look at whatever happened in Manchester, whatever happened anywhere else, what has happened in Brussels, or what has happened closer home in Bangladesh or in India. Not so much India, happily, but in Pakistan, you are willing to take a step which you would never have otherwise thought of. I mean, these are steps which go beyond the pale, beyond any societal norms. So these kind of steps, we see that it is a kind of build up to that. So if you could please get to the next slide. Now, I could talk a lot on how there has been this preacher, Zakir Naik, Dr. Zakir Naik, who has been giving a lot of, again, not violent extremism, but radical thought to a number of people in not all over, not just South India, but even in Maldives. In fact, the Maldives government has complained about him. Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. Now, what he says is, I'm only talking Islam. So he talks about the radical thought, not the violent extremism thought, but it becomes a very easy step to go from there. And which recruiters are looking at. They are within groups, which I'll come down to later on. They're within groups, and they start identifying people. Now, I'd like to just talk about, there wouldn't be time to talk about anything, so I'd just like to touch about what happens in Kashmir, where people are saying, why is it that despite the Indian government wanting to give so many benefits to the Kashmiris, there are still problems and so on. Now, this is the kind of thing that a Kashmiri would talk about. We are being treated as outsiders, which is not true. But anyway, they say that we are ostracized, we are treated as outsiders. Our social needs are being thwarted. Very important. We are suffering from a loss of identity. And so because we are suffering from a loss of identity, we are seeking social opportunities to join extremist groups, and which leads to homegrown terrorism. While we say all this, Soumya, if you could go to the next slide, please. What all our previous speakers have spoken about, we've spoken a great deal on radicalization, is being spoken about how it would affect, but one part we have not spoken about, and that is using the internet as a weaponizing the internet, weaponizing radical behavior. That is something that is very, very important. Now, I'd like to, again, as I said, come to the Kashmir example, because it would be, it's very much what, it's a model that can be easily understood in many other places of the world. Now, in Kashmir, and to an extent, as an Indian government officer, I say this, for the last 70 years, we have not been fair to the Kashmiris, because we have not countered the narrative that has been given to them. So Kashmiris have been given and fed the same narrative over and over again, and it has been fed to them. And this is radicalization well before the internet, and this was something that has been used very well as a weapon, as a part of a hybrid warfare. Now, Burhan Wani, the person who started off this whole internet warfare in the second round of terrorism, one could speak from 2016. He was the kind of person who never lifted up a gun in his life. But what he did do was to go onto the net and say that, I'm not covering my face. I'm going to tell people that I'd like to work towards independence. And it was very cleverly done. He said they did not talk about Azadi or independence for Kashmir. What they kept talking about was the primacy of Islam that needed to be established in Kashmir. And because they needed to establish the primacy of Islam, they would want to have freedom from India. That was the message that he used. That was the message that his followers and Zakir Musa, another person who, names are irrelevant insofar as this was the message that was being used. Now, before that, it is a matter that we need to introspect about, that we not only did not counter the kind of messaging that was done by Buran Wani, but because we had not done our messaging even before. I mean, ISPR in Pakistan, ISI in Pakistan, they do a great job in feeding shibboleths to the Kashmiris. It was very easy for them to enter into this and do it. Now, what we did find was there are strange things that are happening in Kashmir. We found that when the government decided about abrogating Article 370, which gave us special status, everyone said that there was going to be a lot of homegrown terrorism, and of course there was an internet curfew. So they said the e-curfew is, it is violative of human rights, it's violative of the freedom of expression that is guaranteed under the Constitution, and so on. Okay, but while yes, there has been a compromise in terms of freedom of expression, but however, because of the internet shutdown in Kashmir, we found that the negative Twitter impact that was coming, the negative Facebook impact that was coming was much lower. Now, one interesting thing, when the messaging becomes a little different, the Kashmiris were not the local Kashmiri on the street. I mean, this is something that we have seen, but they were not unhappy at the arrest of their leaders, because the local Kashmiri on the street, they did not want to have the same 4-5 families and dynasties going around, whether it is the Abdullahs or the Muftis. They would be very happy because they know the kind of corruption that is there in Kashmir. They were actually quite happy about it. What they were not happy about was the internet shutdown, okay, which is understandable, and the fact that only 2G was being allowed and all that. Now, very importantly, when the Roshni Act, that is, an act in which the previous dispensation in Kashmir had started giving lands, government lands to people for a price, and all the beneficiaries of that were those who had connections. So the Kashmiri on the street was not unhappy at that. Now, what happens is the media bias. There is a lot of media bias because, as I said, we have not been as active as the ISPR. There has been a lot of media bias against Kashmir, and that is why I want you to all please see this chart very carefully. This is the chart which is showing the voting in the district development councils. Here you see there has been a higher percentage of voting than at any other time in Kashmir because it was controlled, because people were not allowed to disrupt it, because people were not allowed to give false narratives on that. Earlier, what used to happen, they would every funeral that would become a recruiting stance. They would have messages passed over. Another thing they would do is there was messages passed over in WhatsApp groups, in Telegram, and so on. As soon as any party, any police or army patrol was being done, so there would be roadblocks, and then there would be stone pelting. Now all that was really brought down, and the average Kashmiri, as can be seen from the DDC elections, because this is actually giving democracy to the roots. There has been an overwhelming response. Such an overwhelming response that even the parties who said that they did not want to participate in it and were against the abrogation of Article 370 saw what was happening, and understood the public mood and started participating on that. This is what is, I feel, very, very important. And this Kashmir situation with the kind of internet with the kind of internet poison that has been fed for so many days will not be restored in a year's time. I mean, I think we would have to give it some time for healing and so on. But the process has started, and this, as I said, this chart is very clear on that. The next one, Soumya, if you could go. This was happening at the time of the elections. This is all very recent. I mean, I just haven't got out the WhatsApp chats for you. If you could look at the names. I mean, it is Shariat Ya Shahadat, United Youth of Kashmir. Now, with that, they're making groups, and what we are seeing is in that group they identify people, and once a person is identified, the next thing they're asked to come on to Rocket Chat, or they're asked to come on to Telegram, and from there on they are recruited in, and we can see how homegrown terrorism is being done. Now, despite the e-curfew in Kashmir, one thing that has to be remembered is that even with 2G, a lot of images are not being streamed, but messages are going. And we've been looking at, and if you look at the messages, it is very clear the trend of what is happening. So while we cannot and we should not naturally stop internet access to anybody or freedom, what we need to do is to have a healing touch and to come up with our counter narratives, which I hope we will be doing. As we can see, we have been able to move up in that to some extent, and I hope we would be able to do it. So this is a point that I want to make, that while the internet is coming up with whatever shibboleth it wants, the danger in these shibboleths is when you come up, when the groups, Kashmiris are not a radical group. I mean, they believe in Kashmiriyat, that is a very moderate form of Islam. However, when you find that there are people who are coming in and putting in these things into various internet groups, you find that there is a kind of collateral radicalization which is going on. And from this collateral radicalization, in a place which is otherwise very tense, it is very easy for it to turn into violent extremism. So the RVE part of it, we see, can be easily can have easier transition in places like Kashmir than elsewhere. So this is what we need to be careful about. Soumya, if you could please come on to the next slide. The next slide. So this is again, I just wanted to show you what is coming out in our favorite neighbors' internet, and what is coming out on their websites and their Facebook. I mean, these are the sort of messages which are being given on a regular and with metronomic regularity into Kashmir. Now, when Pakistan was going through the FATF problem, and when it was going to be put on the grey list, we had a number of things talking about how India should be put onto the black. Now, this is the sort of thing which was coming into Kashmir, and people were actually wondering on what was happening, because at that stage, our agencies had stopped illegal money coming in, and there was naturally a kind of tightening of funds. So there was a lot of anger on it. It was nothing to do with radicalization. It was really very much more a question of how can I get the slush funds which were coming to me and were not coming to me now. And this had created a lot of anger, and hence this whole thing of blacklisting India took a lot of momentum. Now, what we are very scared about is we are very scared about this. We are apprehensive about this kind of messaging that is going on, because you see, we started getting messages. We started seeing messages, WhatsApp messages and Facebook messages from Pakistan about how India was doing money laundering in Armenia. Now, this is a serious matter, because there is a simultaneous thing talking on how Muslims should support the war in Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, Nagorno-Karabakh is not a neighborhood area. There is really no reason why we should, even think of going and participating in that. But there are a number of Pakistani jihadis who are participating in the Nagorno-Karabakh, and there was also a call to ask Kashmiris to go to Nagorno-Karabakh and ask, Muslims from all over India to go, because it was a place where the Ummah was being revived, so to speak. And at that, they started talking on how India was so-called money laundering in Armenia, which was a completely unsubstantiated kind of an allegation. But you see, these are the kind of allegations which would go to vulnerable minds who are otherwise feeling a disproportionate sense of ostracism against the system, if not ostracism within themselves, and this would definitely build upon that. Now, these are the kind of things that we have seen. Now, what we are very worried about is with Syria and Iraq being tightened up, with the camps in Iraq and in Syria, they wanting to send their their citizens back to whichever country. A large number. Of course, we also have some, but much less as compared to our population. But a large number would come back to Pakistan, would come back to Afghanistan, and also those who have learned in Karabakh, who have fought in various wars, and who have learned a number of techniques which are not so prevalent as of now over here. Now, all of you know this whole thing of a bomb in my mother's kitchen, how it had gone really viral. We are very apprehensive about these people coming back because we see that there is a reverse migration back to the AFPAC region. We see this. We also see that the Islamic State now has kind of said, Islamic State in Hind has come out with a statement in May 2019 in which they say that they would merge the Islamic State of Khorasan, which they had now put in Afghanistan and Pakistan, with the Islamic State in Hind. Now, all these are, very worrying developments, because we would see that if there is a reverse migration and there is this kind of messaging that goes on, borders are always going to be porous in a country like ours, and this is something that we need to really be very wary about. And this is
Ma'am, if I can please ask you to conclude, because we are over time. Thank you. Okay.
And you see, so this, as I said, it's a kind of cry havoc situation with this media, which, as I said, we would need to monitor, and we need to be as careful as possible. From the Indian side, we have been, I think, with the help of Israelis and with the help of all of you, we have been more lucky than others in controlling a number of cases. We hope that this kind of cooperation goes on. But we are sitting, if not on a powder keg, we are sitting close to a powder keg, and naturally that does not do for great amount of sleep at the night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Samia, if you can please stop the screen sharing. And really thank you for this in-depth overview on radicalization process with regional case study and how internet can be misused as a social accelerator to radicalization. It is now a great pleasure to turn to Professor Gabrielle Weimann. I think it's not an overstatement or exaggeration to say that Professor Weimann has served as the Northern Star to all researchers and professionals interested on how terrorists use the internet and the media. Gabrielle Weimann is a full professor emeritus at the Department of Communication at Haifa University, a full professor at IDC Herzliya, and of course, a senior researcher at ICT. His research interests include the study of media effect, persuasion and propaganda, terrorism and the internet, modern terrorism in the mass media. He published 9 books and more than 180 scientific articles, including The Theater of Terror, Terror in the Internet, and Terrorism in Cyberspace, The Next Generation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gabrielle Weimann.
Thank you, Stevie. This will be a show and tell slideshow, a very fast one, since I want to keep my 15 minutes limit. So please don't blink. If you blink, you lose at least 2 or 3 slides. So as you can see, my lecture will focus on new trends on online terrorism. And actually, I would like to see the merging and to show you the merging of 4 trends that we note in our research on online terrorism. The first one, and I'll explain the terms, is mixing global broadcasting with narrowcasting. The second one will be the social migration to social media, how terrorists are moving to social media, but also within social media, that is from some social media that were popular to newer ones that they prefer to use now. I'll speak about lone wolves and actually more about the virtual packs behind them, terrorists depicted in a wrong way, as I see it, as lone wolves, while they have virtual packs behind them, hiding in cyberspace. And finally, the emerging trend or the threat of the darknet. I try also to relate with some examples to India. So just to explain that all of this is based on my research that goes on, now it's the 22nd year. We started very early, we started in 1998. We monitor terrorist websites, we archive the data, we code it, and we analyze it, both visual and textual. All our studies are funded by, you have the list here, by various foundations. And all the findings are reported, as you said, 9 books, about 40, 50 special reports, and numerous scientific publications, all of them accessible online. So if you find any topic of mine interesting, search for it online, you probably get free access. So basically, I would say that we noted 4 stages in the emergence of online terrorism. The first one, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, were websites only. That is, the terrorists had websites, usually in one language, but that wasn't enough for them because their websites were very passive and not interactive. So they were looking for interacting with their audiences, to talk to them, to seduce them, to teach them, to convert them. And so they were looking for interactive platforms. And that time they found the second stage was to add to the websites links to forums and chat rooms where they could talk, discuss, and seduce. The third stage emerged with the emergence of social media. One medium after the other, one online platform from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. And today to more, I would say, sophisticated and maybe more protected type of social media, including Telegram, HN, and so on. And the last stage is adding, on top of all of these platforms, also the Darknet, and I will speak about it later. So, the first one, I would like to note the emergence of a mixture of both global broadcasting and narrowcasting. Now, how do you do that? The globalization of online jihad led many jihadist groups to use the internet in order to launch a campaign, a worldwide campaign, to promote the idea of a global caliphate and to globalize a jihad. And since recently, Daesh, ISIS, lost its ground control, its territories in Syria and Iraq, Afghanistan, and others, the move to cyberspace became more evident. That is, instead of fighting on ground, they move now more to the global arena of the cyberspace. Nevertheless, and we can see it on the map, the way that ISIS is now and Al-Qaeda are spread over larger parts of the world. Nevertheless, we see that online platforms, provided them with the notion of narrowcasting. That is trying to, I would say, to appeal to specific subpopulation, specific groups. Let it be children, let it be young people, let it be overseas diaspora communities, Muslims in other countries, Tamil in other lands, including India. And that made the narrowcasting, which is a term they used, they never invented it, but they took it from marketing, advertising, public relations. The idea of slicing down the target audience into smaller groups and focusing on each group, trying to, I would say, to appeal to each type of subpopulation with specific platforms, specific messages, specific appeals. And this is when online social media became so popular and so, I would say, advantageous in the eyes of terrorists and extremists. First, because it's the reach, and I will highlight some data about it. Second, about motive is the speed of diffusion of information and the issue of interactivity. On social media, you can talk to people. It's not a website that you wait for people to come. It's actually you approaching them, talking to them, convincing them, arguing with them, and finally recruiting them. Very important, social media is very popular among the young audiences that rely on social media for everything, from news to entertainment, from communication to information. And young audiences are usually the target group, the preferred target group for terrorists and extremists. And finally, that social media is not actually a media, it's a multimedia environment, because you can put the movies and songs, text, books, lectures, discussions, and so on. Speaking about the popularity, the reach, you can see the numbers of users, of active internet users. Especially, I would like to highlight the column, the second column here, mobile internet users. So most of the people in the world access the internet using the cellular phone. Young people don't need computers, don't need systems. They do it all online, and they use the phones to do it. Now, some of you may say, well, still the third world, the Middle East, is relatively low in internet penetration. Well, not really. Look at these statistics from 2020, and you see the penetration, the high penetration rate in countries in the Middle East. And you can look at the number, and I highlighted it with the arrows, of Facebook penetration. And you see the number of millions in the Middle East, and we are talking about over 133 million people who use the Facebook only in the Middle East. These are the target groups for social media use, for those who target social media for extremism and terrorism. The case of India is interesting, especially since we know that in India there's a population of over 172 million Muslims. Nevertheless, very few of them were recruited by groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS in the past. And we know that less than 100 migrants actually joined ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Nevertheless, it is an appealing, I would say, an attractive target population if you think about global jihad, and especially if you think about globalization, going out, and narrowcasting, focusing on specific groups. So India is now targeted online by jihadi campaigns, and I guess some of you probably know it, and especially if we look at online magazines like that in English, very sophisticated, very smart, very slick, like the Voice of Hind, that combine pictures, text, visuals in a very seductive way. So that was the narrowcasting, and I'll skip that now. And some data about social media, coming back to social media, is that the popularity of social media is somewhat misleading. We know that Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp are the most popular. Nevertheless, we should remember that terrorists are using social media not just according to popularity, but also according to secrecy, anonymity. And recently we see them moving within social media. That is, if Facebook, Twitter were once the most popular ones, now they prefer, for example, Instagram and later Telegram, because these are considered to be safer environments for them. So we have the first wave of terrorist online, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the second wave, migration to safer platforms like Telegram, eChain, TikTok, and so on. Just to note, if some of you are interested, ISIS is also present on TikTok. How should I call it? The childish, innocent, naive type of platform, playing actually video for very young kids and used by extremists, white supremacists, anti-Semites, anti-Zionists, and jihadists. So if you are interested, there's a special report published by us in ICT, Hate on TikTok, and you can access it online. The third, and I apologize for the speed, but I want to keep my 15 minutes limit. The third trend is the lone wolves and the virtual packs. And according to my, I would say, lessons that I learned about lone wolves in nature, they never hunt alone. So is the case of lone wolves in terrorism. There's always a pack behind them. Only that in the case of terrorism, it's usually an invisible, dark pack hiding in cyberspace, because a lone wolf who seemingly appears to be acting alone by herself or by himself, without any clear relationship to any known terrorist organization, well, most of them are linked. They are linked online. They download material, upload material, post material, read the online manuals, communicate online with preachers and with seducers, and all of it is done online. So when we studied 96 cases of lone wolves, none of them was actually alone. All of them had a virtual pack hiding somewhere in cyberspace. And all these guys in my database, all of them seemingly lone wolves, all of them were never alone. They were always had people that seduced them, taught them, launched them, and so on. So basically, the internet is used to call the wolves, to encourage them to come, to teach them how to act, and to glorify them, both as a mechanism of rewarding and as a mechanism of, I would say, recruiting the next generation. You glorify the shaheeds, the wolves that died or killed themselves or tried to kill themselves. And by doing that, like in the case of Nidal Hassan, glorified by the famous jihadi preacher, the rewarding is also a recruitment mechanism to encourage others to follow and get the same share of glory. Now, the last trend that I would like to highlight is the notion of the dark web. And this is the emerging threat today and maybe of tomorrow. Terrorists are seeking safer territories in cyberspace. They know that they are being monitored. They can be found, they can be harmed, they can be arrested, and cases like that were numerous. So they tried to move to lower and deeper levels of the dark web. Now, you probably know that most of the net is in the deep net, and better so. Actually, about 96 to 97% of the material online is not accessible. It's in the deep web. And I say better so because this is the kind of information we want to keep safe in the deep web. Is it your bank account? Is it your medical record? Is it all the private information that you want to keep there, your private communication? It is in the deep web. However, within the deep web, in the lowest level, we have the dark web, we have the darknet, which is referred to as dark, probably because it is abused by criminals, by terrorists, by extremists, people who benefit from the darkness down there. And the darknet, the power of darknet was actually, I would say, demonstrated in the case of Silk Road. Nothing to do with terrorism. It was selling drugs illegally on the darknet. And the person who did it, now in jail, a young guy, profited $1.2 billion by selling and buying drugs in the darknet. Now, the darknet attracted also terrorists, not just criminals, because they know it's harder to find them, safer communication between them. They can coordinate actions then. They can raise funds, important, especially with digital currencies like Bitcoins and others. They can buy and sell explosive, and they can actually store the libraries and keep them safe. Now, these are not scenarios for the future. All of it is already happening. So we can see terrorists are using browsers like Tor and Opera to reach the darknet. They use encryption instruments and secure VPNs, fake GPS, all the instruments of the darknet in order to be safer in the cyberspace. Interestingly, they also raise money. Now, terrorism costs money, but in the past, it was easy to track the money trail and try to stop them and try to arrest them and try to confiscate the bank accounts. Now they move to Bitcoins. And I can show you some examples of attempts to raise funds and direct the supporters to send the money using Bitcoin. And if you see here, by the way, down here, ISIS is like posting Bitcoin account to collect funds, and they even give you a price list. If you can see here, what will $80 get you if you donate to a fighter? Will it be ammunition, weapon, uniform, and so on? And they certainly use the dark web in order to hide material, to keep material like a virtual library, but one which is safe from anyone who will try to invade it. And it includes propaganda material and others. And in some cases, you can see that they even place the best production, like the Flames of War, propaganda material, all in the Darknet. Coordinating actions, no more calling on cellular phones, no more sending emails as it was in 9/11, because they know they will be tracked. Now it's the secret communication in the Darknet. And just recently, September 20, this year, some months ago, Al-Qaeda terrorists were arrested in India using dark web to contact Pakistani-based handlers. So you have it too. Your guys there too are already migrating to the Darknet. What they do on the Darknet is store information about directions, about instructions, how to do it. There is a study here done on Telegram. They studied 98 channels, and they found, and this is the most important part down here, they found that there were many groups there on the Darknet using Telegram with material about explosive construction, low-tech attacks, knives, trucks, and so on, operational and cybersecurity. That is how to be safe as a terrorist online, and nevertheless use the online platforms to attack other facilities, cyberterrorism. So actually, to conclude, what we see now is the merging of these four trends, and this is the way I see it, are the short-term risks that we see in the future. If you find my lecture interesting or you want to get any additional information, leave my email here. You can find it online too. And if you don't find the material that you need online, please don't hesitate, contact me and I'll try to send it to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Weimann, for presenting these 4 key trends. If I can ask you now, it's already done. It's now with great pleasure to welcome Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director Michele Koenigs. We are specifically thankful to CTED and to the Assistant Secretary General for addressing this dialogue, but also for the many years of friendship and cooperation. Michele Koenigs was appointed as Executive Director of the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate, CTED, at the Assistant Secretary General level on August 11, 2017. Previously, she served as President of Eurojust, the Judicial Cooperation Unit of the European Union, where she shared both the counterterrorism team and the task force on the future of Eurojust. She also served as the national prosecutor in Belgium, my home country, and as an expert to the International Civil Aviation Association, ICAO. Assistant Secretary Koenigs, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, thanks a lot, dear Director Weinberg, and a good day to all of you distinguished participants. Allow me to begin by thanking the International Institute for Terrorism, Counter-Terrorism, and IDC, but also the India Foundation for inviting me to participate here today in the virtual conference. If I would zoom in to the landscape of the threat seen with a global lens, I would mention 4 concerns. First and foremost, ISIL and Al-Qaeda related terrorism and the affiliations of ISIL and Al-Qaeda. And more a deep concern at different regional levels, that is extreme right, far right call it racist and ethnically motivated terrorism, or also called extreme right-wing terrorism, the returning foreign terrorist fighters, those who fought in Syria and in Iraq, and finally all this combined with the massive use of internet and ICT, internet, social media for terrorist purposes. And so, yes, there are some concerns at the global level, and the lockdown measures imposed during the pandemic have presented violent extremism and extremists and terrorists with a captive online audience to disseminate their divisive propaganda, disinformation, and conspiracy theories to incite violence. As we just heard in the previous presentation, indeed, young men and women continue to be strategically targeted by the malicious activities, including very young people, and especially on gaming platforms. International efforts have made it increasingly difficult for terrorist groups to exploit large social media platforms for terrorist purposes, driving them more and more towards smaller, less visible platforms and decentralized web services. And these platforms with a smaller reach, however, remain attractive to terrorists as they often lack sufficient resources to remove terrorist content. And as content moderation practices continue to raise concerns about unjustified restrictions to human rights, including the rights to freedom of expression and religion, I must underline that any measure taken to moderate content should be in full compliance with international law, including international human rights law. And the Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee's activities, especially in 2017, tell us that there was, first of all, a comprehensive international framework to counter terrorist narratives, and then finally, as a norm-setting activity, Security Council Resolution 2354 on a counter narrative. And they stress the public-private partnerships are needed to counter incitement to commit acts of terrorism. And these include whole of society, human rights compliant and gender sensitive approaches for counter-terrorist narratives and online propaganda, using both disruptive and preventive measures as well as counter messaging. And this partnership approach taken by CTED, the Executive Directorate of the Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee, in 2017, when it launched the Tech Against Terrorism, an initiative which aims to engage with the tech sector, including smaller platforms, to help to understand the risk that it faces in these areas. And Tech Against Terrorism, TAT, works to understand and anticipate terrorist use of all online technologies, including social media, file sharing, messaging, financial platforms, terrorist-operated websites, and decentralized file service. It engages with high-risk platforms and mentors them so that they are better equipped to design effective policy, processes, and systems to tackle terrorist abuse of their services. And TAT has also launched the Knowledge Sharing Platform, a collection of tools to be used by startups and small tech companies to better protect themselves against exploitation of their services for terrorist purposes. And more recently, it launched the TCAP, and that's a terrorism content analytical platform. CTED and TAT have also worked closely with the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, so-called GIFCT, and its founding members. And we are delighted that GIFCT's members entities have now formalized their partnership, and we look forward to further supporting the GIFCT in its future work. There is another facet of reality. For intelligence and law enforcement, the current online landscape presents significant new challenges, and criminal justice authorities must increasingly rely on information held by private companies to effectively investigate and prosecute crimes, including terrorism. There are ongoing discussions on how to handle the many difficult questions that arise in this context, such as how can we reconcile national sovereignty, and the need for international cooperation in fighting crime while respecting and protecting human rights? Should data be localized nationally? And should law enforcement be able to access data without judicial oversight? And private companies have seen an exponential increase in requests for data from law enforcement, such as basic subscriber data, traffic data, and content data. And they therefore need to consider all of these different aspects. And CTED continues to explore ways to assist member states in these efforts. And we have developed, in that sense, the global initiative to facilitate legal access to data across the borders. This has been done in partnership with UNODC and the International Association of Prosecutors. We're now working with law enforcement and the judicial authorities, as well as with major and smaller private companies, to update our 2019 practical guide for requesting e-evidence across the borders, and to finalize simplified uniform request forms aimed at standardizing direct requests to communication service providers. We're also developing the next version of the practical guide for law enforcement officials to help service providers deal with overseas requests from e-evidence. In the age of growing global digital connectivity, one single actor cannot do anything on itself. We only can address this when we are working alone. So we must work together through partnerships and multilateralism to achieve our common goal. And as we work to narrow the global digital divide, we must also consider the risks associated with new technologies and ensure compliance with human rights principles. To Dahaba, I do thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary General Koenigs. I know that you have to leave us very soon, but before that, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you one question before moving to the other panelists and maybe open this to everyone. I was invited by CTED many years ago in New York, before all of this became so much of an in-depth topic that so many people are working. And there was a major provider of social media there. And one speaker after the other was basically attacking them. And she started a conversation by saying, basically, but what do you want from me? Do you really want Facebook to define what is terrorism? What is incitement to terrorism? Is this our task? And today, many years later, this is where we are going, actually. And my question related to that is, what should be the role of states on the one hand and private companies on the other hand in moderating online content? And what do you see in terms of trends in this area?
Well, first remark, it has apparently been too long ago that you have been invited to join us at CTED, so you have a standing invitation to come as soon as we are able to meet again in person. And this is indeed an ongoing concern. And the answer to both questions, is it more the private sector or more the government and the public sector that have to do their job? It is in fact only through public-private partnerships, PPP, or the cooperation between government and the private sector that we will succeed. And we all know it, big and small companies use AI to moderate their content due to the enormous volume of content they handle. We may not ignore or put aside the mass amount of volume of content that they handle first. And today, as we see, around 99% of terrorist content is identified first through AI by the large platforms before being even reviewed by humans. So major companies like Facebook are taking down over 90% of uploaded content before it's made public, which raises, of course, the questions of transparency, accountability, and we might add some questions such as what do we know about the algorithms used by platforms such as YouTube to recommend your content or your content based on your taste, and how can they contribute to radicalization? question mark. What should be required from those companies in terms of transparency about their decision-making processes to ensure their compliance with the law, including human rights. Today, their decision-making processes have some gender, racial, and religious biases, just to mention a few of those concerns. And what we have seen lately is the establishment of advisory boards by Herzliya, Facebook, and TikTok, which have all been established to improve the content moderation practices while recognizing the criticism. We have seen the advisory councils seen the daylight, Facebook Oversight Board very recently operationalized since October 2020. We have seen TikTok's content advisory council. So you see all these new initiatives all meant to make sure that there is some accountability, that there is some transparency. What will be the effect of that work, we don't know yet. And all measures to moderate content must be transparent and in full compliance with international law, including international human rights law, as I just said. If you look at the government, what the first task of the government is to regulate, to have regulations, and we have seen that they are moving systematically from in an unknown territory, leave it more to the companies. Then let's see at the risks and at the effects, and now more and more regulation with timely responses requested from regulation and differences from region to region to be followed up. Again, the answer is P, it's public-private partnership in a balanced way and in accordance with the human rights conditions, as of course freedom of speech, freedom to speak is a fundamental right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary General Koenigs. I know that you have to leave us now, but we appreciate that you took the time to join us. And with your permission, Professor Gabrielle Weimann and Ms. Prabha Rao, I'll be happy to ask you one question and then take a few questions with the audience. So thank you again, Michele Koenigs. And Mrs. Rao, I'll actually like to continue in the line of Assistant Secretary General Koenigs to really highlight the importance of cooperation. And we're really dealing here with a complex phenomenon which transcends borders, and it's in fact multidimensional. You have a very distinguished career in the Indian police services. Can you share with us what are the key challenges in terms of cooperation that you face, both domestically, internationally, but also multidimensionally, working with the private sector and the public? What did you face in this position in the terms of terrorist use of the internet?
Well, I'd like to give an example. There was an employee in a very well-known firm in software firm in Bangalore, in Infosys, which is globally known. And this person was uploading a lot of terrorist information. In fact, he was one of the guys whom everybody around the world was tracking. And you know, we also realized what was happening, and we had been speaking to Facebook about it. And you know, everything takes time. Like you write to Facebook, and then you by the time you get action on that, it is sometimes 2 to 3 weeks. Now, another thing, at one stage in ISIS, there was the person who was the so-called publicity chief, and he used to come up with these Twitter handles called magnet gas. So every time we complained, we kept saying you have to look at the IMEI numbers, you have to look at the signature of the kind of messaging. That was never done. So magnet gas would be stopped. And then the next day, magnet gas 1, 2, 3, 4 till magnet gas 13 went on. I mean, this was a joke. And you see, he was actually targeting people directly in Kerala, directly in Karnataka, directly in South India, and a number of people in Kerala and Karnataka had landed up, well, not in Karnataka, but Kerala, they've landed up in Afghanistan and so on. Now, we also find it very difficult, like what was discussed in the morning, to our definition of terrorism, our definition of what could be a threat, what could be a law and order situation does not necessarily, we don't have control over what people are talking and thinking about. So we find that there are times when messages are allowed and permitted to get onto the net, and that causes a serious disruption in law and order, while one is not advocating any kind of control or anything of the kind, but but these are very sensitive issues which need to be looked at. And while Google has been usually quite cooperative, the cooperation takes a little time. Now, as regards Telegram, I must say that in one incident, I think all of you would be knowing about it, when we were unable to get any signals on any leads on what had happened, we did manage to get the server to give us the inputs. Now, after that, which we're very happy about, but the process took some time. But after that, ISIS has taken over, and now the terrorists have also taken over to Rocket and other such. It's becoming difficult, and we don't really have any hold on that. I mean, you see this whole discussion between privacy and law and order. While, as I said, we are all for freedom of speech and democracy, there are sometimes a lag in response. This is a really serious problem, because a lag in response can mean quite a bit. This is a real problem that we have.
Thank you very much. My question to you, Professor Gabrielle Weimann, you were one of the first, if not the first, to alert the world on terrorist use of websites, and then you alert about terrorist use of interactive chat room and forum, and you wrote recently an innovative piece, as you mentioned, on far-right use of TikTok, and you wrote a book on terror on the Darknet. Professor Weimann, what's next? What keeps you awake at night?
Oh, I sleep well usually, but I was once asked by a journalist what keeps me awake at night, and I told them that there is one type of narrowcasting which makes me very worried. And this is when very young children are targeted online. And I'm speaking about children who are 4, 5, 6 years old. TikTok is just one example. I can speak about computer games designed by terrorists and launched online. I can speak about cartoons and comics that are actually educating young children to adore terrorism and extremism, self-sacrifice, jihadism, and so on. So that makes me worried. But if you don't mind, Stevie, I would like to refer to the question you directed to the former 2 lecturers, because I believe the answers given by them was not a full one. I'm saying that because the way I see it, these are the old questions, these are the old answers to an old question and not the new answers. The old answers to fighting terrorism online was always try to block them, remove them, make the hosts remove the contents, try to block the internet, or at least to minimize the presence of terrorism online. Now, these are old lessons and old answers given already 20 years ago, and they never worked. They never worked because terrorists are smarter. They can reappear. If you remove them from online, they will reappear in a week or maybe a month, and sometimes hours. It's very hard to trace them online in Darknet platforms. So the answer is try to convince the private companies like Google, Microsoft, and others, TikTok, to cooperate and remove material. Well, I'm not sure I want private companies to be the censors, the political censors of the internet. I'm saying that because my answer will be, I think, a little bit more updated, more looking at the future, and more sophisticated, if I may say so. And this is trying to say that there's no single measure that will work. You have to combine a set of different measures, some of them offensive, some of them defensive. The offensive ones, for example, are not just calling to remove contents, but also trying to interfere with the contents. Keep them there, but try to change the messages. The defensive ones that I see as much more, I would say, productive, include immunizing societies and groups and communities. Counter campaigns online. Why should they be having the only access to the online platforms? Why can't we target or narrowcast the same population that they do with pro-social messages, trying to immune those children, those young people, those frustrated and innocent spectators and viewers and surfers against the campaigns of death, suicide, and violence. There's a whole set of countermeasures that I can provide, but the basic line, the bottom line is, don't rely on one measure, don't rely only on offensive measures. You need a more sophisticated toolkit to fight back.
Thank you very much. I was on mute. Sorry about that. If anyone has any question, feel free to raise your hand. My colleagues Soumya and Daphne will help me also monitor that. And if we don't, I see that we have a question from Nidhi. Nidhi, please unmute.
I wanted to ask you, can we have a rule, an international rule, where we don't have things like dark web and Telegram, which can't be, encrypted, which the government can have access to? I mean, why have a thing which is so dangerous? That is my question. Any panelist can take that.
I guess you directly to me, right? Okay. Again, it's not an easy answer, but it's clear that the fight on terrorism online, extremism online, should be an international one. If only for the simple reason that cyberspace up there has no borders, no police, no border lines, no officers at the border, and no red lines anywhere. It's international. So you can sit in Indonesia and target German population using servers from the US, or you can sit in Canada and target Australians using servers in the Philippines. The war on terrorism online cannot be a national attempt. It must be an international one. And the only way to fight back is try to cooperate. Now, it wasn't easy at the beginning because many countries kept their war for themselves, including Israel. We said, this is our problem. We know how to fight back. We develop our own cyber instruments, cyber weapons. We have our virtual soldiers well-trained to fight back. We don't want to share the information. Now, it doesn't work. And countries like France, Germany, Israel, most of the Western countries learned, and I must say the hard way, that without cooperation, international cooperation, they can't really produce any efficient and productive counter campaigns. So coming back to my last notion, it's not one measure and it's not one state. So we have to apply a toolkit of various instruments, mechanisms, and we have to get as many countries as possible to cooperate in this international fight.
Thank you very much. I see that we don't have any more questions, so this brings our discussion to an end. Oh, sorry, Sharan. By the way, Sharan is also one of our amazing students now at the IDC Herzliya, and he maybe embodies everything about this dialogue is all about.
So, Professor, I wanted to ask the same question about deplatforming. So as long as we keep on pushing them from one platform after the other, in this year alone, riot.im changed into Element. And there's a new platform called Minds, which even the Indian extremist organizations are using. And their literal, and I quote, is saying that it is the anti-Facebook. So there are groups which are an amalgamation of principles of Anonymous, their hacktivist group, creating new platforms which will actively resist cooperating with governments. Earlier, it was the same with Telegram, but now they're cooperating, but they're still not part of Gift City. So, what should we do about these new, smaller platforms which neither have the resources or are willing to cooperate?
I guess you direct the question to me, right?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, thank you. This is one of my students this year. And if it was only you here and not the others, I will tell you, please wait to lesson number 15 when we discuss the future. But since you asked in the public forum, let me ask you that the idea of trying to foresee, to forecast what will be the next platforms is the real answer. The way you described it at the beginning of your question is the right one. I think that what we do is like a mouse and a cat game with the terrorist online. That is, we see how they use our platforms and we try to react. Like we say, well, they're using Facebook. Let's discuss how can we block Facebook from being used and abused by them. And then comes YouTube, and then comes Twitter, and then comes WeChat, and whatever TikTok, whatever platform emerges, they will use it. And then we try to react. Now, my idea is to be a little bit more proactive and think about the future. That is, can we think about the emerging next platform? How can we design the future platforms? The next Facebook, the next Instagram, the next YouTube, or if you want, the next virtual coin, the next type of virtual currency. How can we encourage the designers to think about terrorism? Because Mark Zuckerberg, when he was designing Facebook, never thought about terrorism. I'm not sure he was designing this kind of empire, but it's quite clear that if you encourage and if you find a way to reward the designers of platforms to consider measures to minimize I would say, the options, the vulnerability to terrorism, maybe the next generation of platforms will be safer.
Thank you, Professor. And I have a follow-up, Professor. You were talking about narrowcasting. So in India, you're talking about narrowcasting, and we talked about in the earlier classes also. So in India, there are multiple languages. So there's one issue where narrowcasting is done through different languages, and tracking it is very hard. And in the earlier session, we were talking about using AI and big data. So how do you see or how do you combat narrowcasting where it is done through on a linguistic basis?
Okay, first of all, terrorists are aware that some of the populations they target use different languages. This is the case certainly in India, where you have so many subpopulations, so many languages, and even divisions, social divisions, religious divisions, and so on. Now, in some ways, I think that, again, speaking about globalization and narrowcasting, the combination, you can see that they know that English is a very common language in India, despite the different groups, sects, and regions, and they use the voice of Hind is in English. And based on the assumption that many of the, let's say, potential surfers will be able to read it. Nevertheless, I'm quite sure, and this is a case to follow in the future, when terrorists will become more and more active, and let me, I would say, at least try to assume that we will see a growing targeting of the Indian population by jihadists and extremists online. You'll see a growing sophistication in terms of narrowcasting different groups in India. Will it really work? Well, here's a project for you in the future.
Thank you, Professor.
Ms. Rao, we also had a question for you from Kanchana asking about if there is any mechanism of doing sentiment analysis before major events to preempt violence. Well, maybe Ms. Rao is not with us anymore, but this anyway, then we will conclude our discussion. And on behalf of all of us, a big thank you to the panelists, to Ms. Prabha, to Professor Gabrielle Weimann, and Assistant Secretary General Michele Koenigs. And on their behalf, also thank you to all of you, especially those of you in India who stayed very late to listen to us. I would like to thank once again Captain Alok Bansal and the India Foundation, and we'll continue tomorrow at 8 a.m. Israeli time, 11:30 India time, for a fascinating panel on cryptocurrency, dark web, and connective network, terrorism financing, and financial fraud. We will meet again at 3 Israeli time, 6:30 India time. We'll have the second session of the day on state response to cyber threat against critical infrastructure. And we will conclude our event at 5:30 Israeli time, 9 p.m. India time, with the India Foundation ICT Cyber Security Dialogue, a conversation between cybersecurity leaders, where we'll have the privilege to listen to retired Lieutenant General Rajesh Pant, who served as the National Cybersecurity Coordinator of India, and to his Israeli counterpart, Mr. Igal Una, the Director General of Israel National Cyber Directorate. On this week of the holidays of Hanukkah, the Jewish Festival of Lights, we hope that 2021 will bring you all much good health and a lot more brightness in your homes. And like we traditionally say at the end of Jewish holidays, next year in Jerusalem, or New Delhi, or New York, or Herzliya, just not on Zoom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are winding up with this session, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow morning, India time, 11:30 and 8 a.m. Israel time. Looking forward to another interesting session, and followed by, of course, evening sessions. I hope you all join in